So last time, we looked at Hobbes's Leviathan. And what did he say in this work? Well, he offered us a theory of human nature, and he offered us a certain analysis of government and law in Western society. He thought that people were fundamentally motivated by passion, by feeling, although they had a rational component, and that humans were basically self-interested. Consequently, if we try to conceive of human beings in the state of nature, where there isn't a government or rule or law enforcement maintaining order, Hobbes thinks that would not be good for people. Remember, he thinks that the state of nature for human beings would be chaotic and violent and insecure. Why? Well, just reflect on your own experiences and think about the experiences you've had with other people in your life. Do you trust the average person? Do they seem kind and loving to you? Or do they seem self-interested? Are they looking out for number one? Hobbes thought that fundamentally we're all looking out for number one. And fear plays a large role in our lives. Although we have a lot of freedom in the state of nature to kind of do whatever we want because there aren't any laws or rules, there are no sovereigns or authorities with their thumbs on us, this would not be a good place to live in. And so, he hypothesizes that throughout history, various groups have come together, formed a social contract amongst themselves to set aside some of their natural liberty in order to set up a sovereign, set up a government that can maintain this order and provide some security and peace to human life so that we can cooperate on a bunch of things, right? The production of culture, technology, art, philosophy, manufacturing, trade, and all the rest. So, if we regard Hobbes as having a pessimistic view of human nature, or you might say a realistic view, depending on what you believe, the thinker that we're looking at today, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Swiss Romantic philosopher, is going to take the opposite view. He's going to say, no, human beings are not fundamentally self-interested and fearful and mean and greedy. Rather, Rousseau is going to say humans are basically good. They are born with perhaps those dispositions and tendencies to share and cooperate and show compassion. Thus, Rousseau is going to be optimistic and romantic about human nature and the state of nature. What we see in Hobbes's Leviathan is a very intense, logical analysis, rational analysis of all of this stuff. But Rousseau is working within the Romantic tradition. The Romantic tradition was a European social and philosophical movement that rose in response to the Enlightenment. Remember how we characterized the Enlightenment. It was a time in human history in which the thinkers and the people saw the value in reason, and they wanted to apply reason to the domains of human life. Provide actual arguments and justifications for their views. Individually research and investigate these questions. Not just take the answers they had been given from tradition and church authority and all the rest as a matter of faith, but thinkers who try to allow their lives to be lit up by the light of reason in their thought, speech, and action. And thus what we saw during the Enlightenment was this heavy insistence in use of reason. This idea that maybe reason could solve all of our human problems. Well, the thinkers that came after them, the Romanticists, did not agree. Yes, they saw that reason was useful and helpful, that science can do these great things, it can produce these new forms of technology that make human life better. that perhaps they may concede in some ways. The standard of living had improved and things were looking better for people. But they didn't think reason was the be-all, end-all of human life. What is it that makes life worth living? Is it being a logical, rational computer all the time? Being objective and analytical? The romanticists are going to say no. No. It's passion. It's feeling. It's music and art and literature. Human relationships, compassion. These are the things that we should be focusing on and leaning into. Not prioritizing reason in every domain in our lives. Or science or the scientific method. And so this is the tradition that Rousseau is writing within and contributing to. So, his philosophy is going to be poetic. It's going to be romantic. It may tend to look at things from an idealistic perspective, you might say. In any case, the main point that I'd like to internalize is this. Rousseau is going to offer a completely different picture of these things than Hobbes. Rather than concluding, like Hobbes, government and law has been an awesome thing for humans, it has improved human life, it's great, Rousseau is going to question that. He's going to ask, have these things really been great for us? Has there really been moral progress? Do we need all of this crap? Do we need all of this technology? Does that actually fulfill us and make our lives better? These are some of the questions that we're going to be investigating today. Thus, we could say that Rousseau is going to provide for us something like an alternative history, explanation, and analysis of Western society. Though he is working within this social contract tradition that Hobbes helped pioneer, he's going to come to some different conclusions. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, well then we're going to get into it. Hopefully that has set the stage for you to give you a better sense of what Rousseau is going to be arguing in this piece. I asked you to read just a few pages from his essay, Discourse on Inequality. And it is in this essay that Rousseau tries to get to the bottom of, well, where did inequality among people come from? How and why is it exacerbated? And generally, what is the status of Western society with its laws, its law enforcement, its technology, its consumption and production, and all of these different things? We're going to start by looking at Rousseau's hypothetical story for the development of human societies and the state of nature. And we're starting here because it helps put Rousseau's views into perspective. You can just hold on to that. Rousseau begins with something like a very basic social and geographical analysis to describe how human societies have evolved and developed over time. If you've ever taken a geography class or an anthropology class, there's a pretty basic idea that comes up, which is this. Societies don't develop in a vacuum. Societies, in part, evolve due to the specific environmental challenges and geographical characteristics in which those people reside. So, for example, you have a community of people that are living and growing up in a forest and learning what's what. What are some of the things that they're going to do? Well, in order to survive, in order to reproduce, they're going to cultivate the resources from their environment to do that. They might develop certain tools or certain practices in order to achieve a better mastery over their natural environment. So they will gather berries and nuts and roots from the forest and they'll eat those. They'll hunt the animals of the forest and they'll use the animal parts to make clothing and tools and all of these different things. In some general sense, that's what communities are doing wherever they reside and wherever they're evolving. But communities that are evolving in different places are going to differ based on the environment in which they're living. So, compared to the community in the forest, if you have a group of people that grew up and are living by a river, they're going to go to the river and try to use that to cultivate resources, right? The people in the forest may never develop fishing because there might not be any bodies of water around them. But the people that live by the rivers, by the seas, by the oceans, they'll move in there and they'll try to use tools and engage in different practices to catch fish and eat and do all of that. Similarly, people in the mountains will learn how to traverse the mountains, and perhaps they won't be very good on the water. They won't know the ins and outs of the forest. Maybe they'll live in caves. They'll figure out how to live in that way. So the first basic point is this. The specific environmental challenges that humans faced influence the societies in which they lived. Thus, where somebody lives, the resources that that group of people has access to is going to influence the kind of lives that they lead, how their society evolves, the tools, the practices, and the social rituals that they end up developing. I mentioned fishing, hunting, gathering, and so on. Obviously, this takes a long time. Humans don't just spring up or jump out of the womb ready to walk and knowing how to fish and knowing how to organize a society and what the rules are. These are things that they need to be taught. These are things that they need to develop. And so slowly over time, Rousseau hypothesizes, these different groups are evolving and learning and growing in these different parts of the world. Consequently, their societies are informed by where they live, the climate, the temperature, the resources they have access to. But over time, if those groups can survive and reproduce, they learn more and more about their world, right? They come to achieve a better mastery over their natural environment, over the animals, over the plants. They learn to figure out what they should eat and what not to eat. You know, when the first person went into the Amazon rainforest and took two plants and put them together and then consumed them, they were like, I'm tripping balls, man. Okay, this is interesting. So slowly over time, people in different parts of the world established superiority over the animals and achieved higher levels of mastery over nature. We can talk about the domestication of animals. We can talk about learning how to sail better, learning how to gather and hunt better, and so on. And so too would these societies be influenced by their dealings with other groups and other societies, right? It is not just the natural environment that humans have to contend with, but also other groups, if other groups happen to live around them. Okay, so their geography impacts the development of their society. Slowly over time, humans domesticate animals. They learn how to cultivate resources better. They learn how to live better so they can survive better. Eventually, humans formed communities, and they began inventing things not necessary for survival. Why? Well, having achieved a sufficient mastery over nature, they can now spend their time doing other things, right? Like producing artifacts, or producing certain jewelry, creating music, creating social rituals and customs. After living in groups for a while, they began to engage in what we might call unnecessary activities. But this could only happen after they had achieved a certain mastery over their natural environment. Because if you're not surviving, you can't do any of this other stuff, like invent music or instruments or dancing, religion, and so on. Well, obviously, the development of human societies didn't stop here. Humans would continue to adapt. They would face new challenges as a result of their social customs and rituals. They would face new issues if they happened to meet another tribe or group who were fighting over the same resources as they were. In any case, the basic point is that human societies continue to develop and evolve. At some point, we probably do not know when, Rousseau says, these communities began to develop values and moralities and systems of reward and punishment. After having mastered their natural environment, they began to think more about the nature of human life. How is it that we should live? How should we organize ourselves socially? What kinds of rules should we live by? What do we want and not want to allow in our society? And we could say, if we want to look at this from an evolutionary psychological perspective, these kinds of values and feelings fell out of the natural evolution of human brains and human bodies and so on. So societies continue to evolve. They continue to become more complex. Eventually, what Rousseau called civil society was formed. And this is the kind of society that we live in now. societies which engage in all of these things unnecessary for survival, that are informed by all of these systems and structures and traditions, but which continue to develop after a particularly important point in human history. The invention of private property. For Rousseau, this is going to be a turning point in human history. He says that civil society was formed when the first person put up stakes around a particular piece of land and said, "This is mine, no one else may use it." As we'll see, he thinks once this happened, this set off a chain of events that would forever transform us, and ultimately that would make us worse people. But before this, romantically, he thought humans got along pretty well. Sure, there might have been some violence between warring tribes, but these people were happy. They cooperated with one another in their communities. They respected each other. They looked out for each other. You might even hypothesize that these communities lived according to some kind of primitive communistic mode of organization. They had what they needed, but little else. They didn't have any desire for Netflix or phones or computers. We might have considered them nowadays to be living a primitive lifestyle, but Rousseau thinks these people were at their best and happiest, which is why he says, mankind in the state of nature was the best and happiest, quote, placed by nature at an equal distance from the stupidity of brutes and the fatal ingenuity of civilized man. Thus, in contrast to Hobbes, Rousseau thought the state of nature was good for humans. People were happy here. They cooperated here. Life was good. They didn't have to worry about dealing with complex social and economic systems and problems and taxes. Remember to do your taxes? They didn't have to worry about any of that. All they had to worry about was, well, survival. That was it. And they were surviving. They had developed enough to know how to do that and do that well. In this state, he thought that humans naturally cooperated. They had what they needed, but little else. However, again, as we'll see, with the invention of private property, all of this changed. Humans reached a point in their social and economic development from which, in some sense, they could not return. That would forever influence the development of societies and economies and governments and all of these different things. Thus, while Hobbes thinks that humans are naturally self-interested, and because they are rational, they will use violence to achieve their ends, we get a different formulation and argument from Rousseau in this piece. He does not think that people are naturally evil or bad. No, he thinks that people are fundamentally good. The problem is that since the invention of private property and socialization and education and this artificial environment that we've constructed for ourselves, because of all of this, humans are made bad. They are conditioned into having these negative emotions, these feelings of greed and ambition and jealousy, these insecurities with regard to status and fame, fear of missing out. What has influenced humans more strongly than perhaps our nature, our biology, is this deleterious artificial society that we have built. And he discusses this on page 28. Without my expatiating thus uselessly on these details, everyone must see that as the bonds of servitude are formed merely by the mutual dependence of men on one another and the reciprocal needs that unite them, it is impossible to make any man a slave, unless he be first reduced to a situation in which he cannot do without the help of others. And since such a situation does not exist in a state of nature, everyone is there his own master, and the law of the strongest is of no effect. Thus, what we get from that passage is this. In the state of nature, everyone gets to decide how they want to live, what they want to do, what time they wake up, what they do with their day. Do we get to do that in our society? Are we ultimately the masters of ourselves in our own time? What do you think? Or are we dependent on a system that constrains us, that makes us work, that makes us do things we don't want to do? See, in the state of nature, everybody was responsible for their own life. People were fairly independent. They could do what they want. In order to survive, they must have been, somewhat physically active and psychologically strong, because they're dealing with all these real issues. The lion on the savannah, the poison frogs in the forest. These people were not weak. They were strong. They were independent. They could take care of themselves. They had survival skills. Not so most of us nowadays. We have constructed a system, Rousseau thinks, in which we are all dependent on one another to do certain things. You're dependent on a job to survive. You're dependent on this university to get an education so you can survive. You're dependent on these vast social and political and economic systems to keep the lights on and do all of these things for you and give you the opportunities to watch Love is Blind or whatever it is. What he says is, after the invention of private property, humans' engagement with mass agriculture, mass production and consumption, and social and political institutions has been bad for us. In some way, you could say, according to Rousseau's analysis, every step towards increased civility and industriousness has weakened humans and made them more unhappy and dependent on each other. See, in the state of nature, there were what Rousseau calls natural inequalities between people. Some of you in this room are smarter than others. Some are stronger than others. Some are faster than others. There's not much we can do about that. Okay, that's how it is. But the problem with the society that we have constructed for ourselves is that now we have all of this artificial inequality bearing down on people and oppressing them and constraining them. Inequality that doesn't need to be there. Vast amounts of wealth lie in the hands of the few who exploit this system for their own ends. Meanwhile, we need to work within this system to survive. And what are we doing according to at least some neo-Marxist or critical theorists? We're contributing to the development of a system which is going to further constrain and oppress us. And we're stuck. Now there are inequalities between wealth and those who don't have wealth, between those that have status and privilege and those that don't, between fame and those that are not famous. Even in some rudimentary way, between those who have the latest iPhone and those who don't. Because for some reason in this society, people care about that shit. When none of that ultimately should matter. Thus, humans' increased dependence on each other and their practice of hoarding resources that they do not personally need to survive produced artificial inequality. He talks about this on pages 33 and 34. So long as men remained content with their rustic huts, so long as they were satisfied with clothes made of the skins of animals and sewn together with thorns and fish bones, adorned themselves only with feathers and shells, and continued to paint their bodies different colors, to improve and beautify their bows and arrows, and to make with sharp-edged stones fishing boats or clumsy musical instruments. In a word, so long as they undertook only what a single person could accomplish, and confined themselves to such arts that did not require the joint labor of several hands, they lived free, healthy, honest, and happy lives, so long as their nature allowed, and as they continued to enjoy the pleasures of mutual and independent intercourse. But from the moment one man began to stand in need of the help of another, from the moment it appeared advantageous to any one man to have enough provisions for two, equality disappeared. Property was introduced, work became indispensable, and vast forests became smiling fields, which man had to water with the sweat of his brow, and where slavery and misery were soon seen to germinate and grow up with the crops. Thus, what kick-started the mess we are in was this invention of private property. Somebody claiming land for their own, barring others from its use, claiming the resources on that land, so on and so forth. Since then, we have become more dependent on each other for survival, less independent, less moral, weaker, less stable, less kind and loving. None of this would be possible without the invention of private property. slowly over time, as people began to divvy up the land or claim it for themselves, bar others from its use it for their own ends, hoard resources, and then sell it back to people. Resources which formerly anybody could have gone and gotten without having to pay anything. Once humans started doing this, metallurgy and agriculture and manufacturing arose. And what has the result of that been throughout human history? Well, Rousseau is going to say, now production and profit has taken precedence over providing and caring for people. This unjustifiable right to private property. And there are many other problems associated with this. I've hinted at a few, but let me make one clear right now. In the state of nature, what did we want and what did we need? Well, basically those two categories were the same. We wanted food, we wanted water, we wanted shelter, we wanted clothing. Maybe we wanted the cute guy in the hut next to us to smile at us, I don't know. What do we want and need now? We want video games. We want our Starbucks coffee in the morning. God forbid we lose our Stanley Cup or we're going to freak the fuck out. People need to have every little thing their little way. If they don't get their coffee in the morning, they're going to freak. We have what Rousseau calls all of these artificial needs and desires for things that we don't really need. We don't need diamond earrings. We don't need a MacBook Pro. We don't need Netflix or Hulu. We don't need to go to the Pirates game on $1 hot dog night, although that is fun. Now we have all these needs and desires for things that we don't really need. And this is not good for us. Have you noticed that when you do get these things, you are still not ultimately fulfilled? I'll give you all the video games, money, drugs, and rock and roll in the world. Are you fulfilled? Are you happy? No. Because these things, these materialistic things, are not going to fill us up. They're not going to provide us with happiness and fulfillment. And yet we've constructed a society in which that's what everybody wants, that's what our lives are geared towards, that's what everything is all about. And people are more depressed than ever. If I can recall correctly, your generation is exhibiting the highest levels of anxiety and depression that we have ever seen. And you have more than any person in human history. Rousseau is going to say that's not a coincidence. We become these people now that are pushed and pulled by these desires for useless and unnecessary things. And these natural inequalities that exist between us, what you might call inequalities in capacity, strength, speed, stamina, whatever, intelligence. They began to multiply themselves in artificial inequalities. Inequalities of wealth, clout, power. And over time, slowly, human beings have become worse. We become physically and psychologically weaker, you might say, less stable, less secure, filled up with all these artificial needs and desires. We become mean, petty, greedy, ambitious, jealous, cruel. Rousseau is going to say, just look back at the people that were living in the state of nature. Look back at how people behave, for example, in tribal societies that we have now. He might say, they are better people. And so we have constructed this system, this artificial environment that has made us worse. What his philosophy implies is the socialization, the upbringing, the education, all of this stuff that informs who you are has done some really bad things to you. You've been taught to want and desire the wrong things. You've been taught to chase after the wrong things. You have accepted that all of this is good and you should support it. Or if you reject that, you're still supporting it, right? By being here, contributing to the system, the status quo. In some sense, all of this was an inevitability. And Rousseau provides an argument for that. An inevitability, at least, once private property was invented. Why? Well, think about it like this. You're living on one side of the hill. You and your little community. You're happy. You're living in the state of nature. The group on the other side of the hill, they just invented this thing called private property. And what have they done? Oh, okay, somebody put up stakes around a piece of land. They're like, this is mine. I'll tell you what. I'll offer you guys some stuff. If you come work this land for me, we can make a bunch of shit if we work together. We could sell that shit to some of the other communities. Get more stuff. Get more power. That will allow us to reproduce better. There will be more of us, so we can work more and more power. We can conquer other people. Once private property became a thing, each society that understood what was possible on account of this way of dividing up land and working on it and cooperating recognized that, oh shoot, if those guys over there are doing that private property thing, how can we stand against them unless we do that? They're going to be making more money than us. They're going to be cultivating more food than us. We need to do that private property thing too over here on this side of the hill. And so, Rousseau hypothesizes, to protect their land and their things and themselves, multiple societies like this were formed with these institutions and these systems. Why? Well, because they recognized the kinds of possibilities that private property introduced, and they recognized that, at least unconsciously, they would not be able to protect themselves and their families and their community if they also didn't engage in this way of life. They would get steamrolled. Thus sprang forth states and political institutions, laws, structures, and rights, which are meant to protect private property. He discusses this near the end of the piece. With this view, after having represented to his neighbors the horror of a situation which armed every man against the rest, and made their possessions as burdensome to them as their wants, and in which no safety could be expected, either in riches or in poverty, he readily devised plausible arguments to make them close with his design. "Let us join," said he, "to guard the weak from oppression, to restrain the ambitious, and secure to every man the possession of what belongs to him. Let us institute rules of justice and peace, to which all, without exception, may be obliged to conform. Rules that may, in some measure, make amends for the caprices of fortune, by subjecting equally the powerful and the weak to the observance of reciprocal obligations. Let us, in a word, instead of turning our forces against ourselves, collect them in a supreme power, which may govern us by wise laws, protect and defend all the members of the association, repulse their common enemies, and maintain eternal harmony among us." Far fewer words to this purpose would have been enough to impose on men so barbarous and easily seduced, especially as they had too many disputes among themselves to do without arbitrators, and too much ambition and avarice to go long without masters. All ran headlong to their chains in hopes of securing their liberty. For they had just wit enough to perceive the advantages of political institutions, without experience enough to enable them to foresee the dangers. The most capable of foreseeing the dangers were the very persons who expected to benefit by them. And even the most prudent judged it not inexpedient to sacrifice one part of their freedom to ensure the rest, as a wounded man has his arm cut off to save the rest of his body. Such was, or may well have been, the origin of society and law, which bound new fetters on the poor and gave new powers to the rich, which irretrievably destroyed natural liberty, eternally fixed the law of property and inequality, converted clever usurpation into unalterable right, and, for the advantage of a few ambitious individuals, subjected all mankind to perpetual labor, slavery, and wretchedness. It is easy to see how the establishment of one community like this made that of all the rest necessary, and how, in order to make head against united forces, the rest of mankind had to unite in turn. Societies soon multiplied and spread over the face of the earth, till hardly a corner of the world was left in which a man could escape the yoke and withdraw his head from beneath the sword which he saw perpetually hanging over him by a thread. Civil right having thus become the common rule among the members of each community, the law of nature maintained its place only between different communities, where, under the name of the right of nations, it was qualified by certain tacit conventions in order to make commerce practicable and serve as a substitute for natural compassion, which lost, when applied to societies, almost all the influence it had over individuals, and survived no longer except in some great cosmopolitan spirits, who, breaking down the imaginary barriers that separate different peoples, follow the example of our sovereign Creator and include the whole human race in their benevolence. And so Rousseau paints a pretty disturbing picture for us. To protect their property, themselves, their possessions, humans banded together to form states and political institutions with laws, rights, structures. And is this good for us? Rousseau says no, because all of these things bind and constrain us. They make us weaker. They make us less secure. And they make us more immoral. you might hear your parents or your grandparents say, things were not like this when I was a kid. Maybe you could just say that's boomer talk or something. But a lot of them will attest to the fact that they could leave their doors unlocked at night. They could let their children play in their neighborhood at all hours. Not too long ago, there used to be a PSA on the television at 10 p.m. asking, do you know where your children are? It used to be safe for children to play outside. And so on top of this unjustifiable thing called private property, societies, with all of this political stuff, government laws were formed. We are now bound up in this system. We are constrained. We are forced to work. And we don't really care about each other. We have become self-interested because of the system that we have set up and subjected ourselves to. And so in contrast to Hobbes, who's going to say, government has been a good thing. It's allowed us to cooperate. Rights and political systems are good things. They protect us and give us security and peace. Rousseau is going to offer the opposite picture. Compared to humans in the state of nature, people and relationships have become corrupted. By what? Well, by these very social institutions that we live within. People now are more dependent on each other. They are enslaved to one another in new ways. People are less happy and healthy. People are suspicious of others, distrusting. We are competitive, jealous, greedy. And we are less free to do what we want. And so people are not naturally born bad or greedy. In some sense, what we get from Rousseau's philosophy is the idea that people are made that way. On the nature-nurture debate, Rousseau falls down on the nurture side. Why is there inequality? Why do people suck? Why is the American dream not attainable for you? It's because of nurture. It's because of our social institutions. So no, this has not been a good thing for humans, Rousseau thinks. All in all, it has made us worse people. Weaker, less secure, more dependent, and enslaved. And so what we see in his philosophy is not only an analysis of basically all the stuff that Hobbes was talking about, that we touched on last time, but also a possible solution. From his works, Rousseau advocates for the emergence of what he calls the noble savage. And what he means by this is we need to take the wisdom and knowledge that we have as a result of living in the systems that we have constructed for ourselves, but we should probably return to a simpler way of life. We should rid ourselves as much of these artificial needs and desires that we have. We should learn to do without. We should cultivate gratitude again. We should shake off all those things that are not serving us, that is making us compete cruelly against others. In some sense, we should abolish civil society as we know it. Because living a more natural way of life, closer to the state of nature, is what would be best for us. The education, upbringing, and socialization we have received has been unhealthy, and it has inculcated an unhealthy mindset and mode of being within us. And so, to summarize, Rousseau basically provides the opposite picture of Hobbes. Hobbes thinks that humans are naturally self-interested and will resort to violence to achieve their ends. Rousseau thinks the opposite. He's like, no, people are basically naturally good and cooperative and compassionate. Hobbes thinks that governments and political institutions have been a good thing. Perhaps the invention of private property has been a good thing. Rousseau thinks the opposite. He thinks that this private property thing has kick-started the mess that we are in. We should get rid of it. It's making our lives worse. It's putting wealth in the hands of a few. We're not seeing it. If you want to get Marxist with it, you could say we are alienated from ourselves, our work, others. We do not see ourselves reflected in our work. We do not get to keep the products of our labor, so on and so forth. And so he has a rather negative view of all of this stuff. What do y'all think of this view? Does he get some things right? Does he get some things wrong? I'd love to hear what you have to say. You want to say something?
I don't know. Because I like it. Like, I think it's, like, a good thing. But it's, like, if it's realistic, is what...
If it's realistic. Okay, say more about that.
I don't know. I just always think about, like, crazy people who are, like, nuts.
Okay.
And, like, what the other guy was talking about, like...
Hobbes?
Yeah, if you have to, like, lock the doors down and everything. So, like, I really like this, and, like, I would like this to be true. But, I don't know.
Yeah, so maybe, here's one thing you might think. Yeah, okay, he makes some good points. But look, dissolving the government and the police would be batshit insane. Unless we could get people to change. Maybe, right? If you are distrusting of people, if you think that they will hurt you, then you might think, well, okay, yes, I agree with this idealistically, but there needs to be a transformation of people's hearts and minds if this is going to work. I mean, that is something that Rousseau is trying to get at. We've all been corrupted by these social institutions. We do not see the world in a holistic way. We have lost touch with history, with the goodness and compassion of the human heart. If you want to over-exaggerate it, you could say we've been kind of brainwashed into monsters. What were you going to say?
I feel like the truth of like how things really are lies somewhere between what he's saying and what the other dude said.
Okay.
It's not. I think there's true things in both of what they're saying. Like, even if you just think back to like the facts of like our history, and like a lot of our wars have solely happened because people felt entitled to other people's property. Like, it's literally happening right now. Like,
Sure.
everything happening with Israel and everything, like, that's what it is. They think they're entitled to somebody else's land that, like, people would argue they're not. So, like, even with, like, the Native Americans, like, the war that happened with that, like, this was their land before somebody came and, like, colonized it.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, they were living very peacefully here before people came in and felt entitled to their property. So I think that a lot of our, like, the factual, like, historical aspect is really true about, like, the private property thing, because, I mean, there's probably more than we can count wars revolved around that alone, you know?
Sure.
A lot of people
Sure.
ended up dead because of that. And still, it's like, even, I don't know, like, I feel like even if there were peaceful time in the state of nature, it was a very short amount of time. Because, like,
okay.
I feel like even if you think way further back, even
you're
before, like, Native Americans, like, just think way back to, like, the beginning of everything, I think that there were these problems way before we know. Like, there was no way that, like, for a long period of time, there were, like, everyone just, like, living in harmony. Like, I just feel like
You think that's a little
not
idealistic?
possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because regardless, like, we're not all pure. Like, we do have bad qualities to our personalities. Like,
So the question is this line between good and evil natural or not? There are differing views about this, right? Hobbes is going to say, yeah, like, people naturally will do sometimes good things, sometimes bad things. That's how we are. Rousseau is going to say, no, like, the reason why people are bad is because they've been made bad. Which maybe there is some truth in that. If you're a Christian, you believe that line is, if not natural, something that we alone ourselves cannot do anything about, and that it is in every human being. Why? Well, just go back to Genesis and read the story of the fall, where sin has entered the world, and now we are estranged from God, and our will is set against His. We could talk about original sin, all of that different stuff. I'm a little suspicious that everything was hunky-dory back then, too. But I do recognize that those ways of life were better in some respects.
like, there's people on islands that still live, like, a tribal life. Like, I was just seeing something about this, and, like, there's this island that no one can, like, go to. I forget what it's called.
Yeah.
Like, if you try to, like, go to their island, like, they will kill you because that's, like, their land.
Right.
But they still live, like, very tribally, and, like, I feel like they're peaceful amongst one another. It's just when other people try to disrupt them from, like, the outside, which I can understand. Like, you don't want people coming in and, like, invading your home. Like, that makes sense. Like, it's like they have a right to be violent and, like, want to, like, I don't want to say they have a right to, like, kill people, but, like, to be pissed off that people are trying to, like, colonize their land, like people have been doing for so long.
Right. Yet, what do the rest of y'all have to say about this? Does this seem right to you? Is he just romantic and over-exaggerating how many problems there are?
This just might be more into semantics, but I don't think that with time they just rely on each other more, because I think we've always, from the beginning, humans have been together in community creatures. I think we rely on systems more now. But I do think it's important to make that distinction that we rely on systems more than other people. Like, we don't rely on other people more than we have in the past. In fact, I think we rely on other people less than we have in the past.
Okay.
And I think it's because of those systems and because of the ease of pushing people away and saying you can do it on your own and that kind of stuff, which on your own means being singular and relying on those systems, just not the actual people and the humanity behind it.
Yeah, I think he has kind of like a social view. I think he's going to say, yeah, I mean, people live by themselves, they do stuff by themselves. But here's one way you could look at it. What happens if the water in your dorm room is broken and it doesn't flow? Can you fix that?
School doesn't fix it either.
You're reliant on the school to fix it, right? Does anybody here have survival skills necessary to survive in the woods by yourself? The majority of people do not. Okay? They do not know how to start a fire, how to collect water, how to get rid of the pathogens within it, how to construct a shelter for themselves. So in some real way, right, we're dependent on all of these systems to live and survive, right? You need a job to make ends meet. You need the plumber to fix your pipes. You need the electrician to make sure your electricity works. You're reliant on AT&T, so you have your internet access in your room or whatever it is, right? So, yeah, maybe it's a both and. Maybe you're right and he's right in different ways.
I was thinking that comes with like I think I have survival skills, because I don't want to sound like too much of a nerd, but I want to
Yeah.
to do like survival camp stuff like that. But I wouldn't want to do that permanently. It's fun to go on camping trips. It's fun to go on weekend trips. I'd rather kill myself than have to get rid of the necessities that we have now, and like I'm like overconsumption's bad and all, but like we have so much comforts and joys now from the ease of technology and other things like that. Like, yeah, is it a burden to have to carry a phone on you all day so people have ease of access to you? Yes, but that also comes with a lot of benefits, joys, and comforts. Like, I don't have to carry cash on me all the time. I can literally, especially now with the advent of like Apple Pay and stuff, like I can just carry my phone, don't even need a wallet on me. So like, I enjoy the comfort of what I currently have, and I would not rather go back to the ways of nature, I suppose.
Okay. So yeah, you're like, look, I like a lot of this stuff, right? I don't want to give it up. To play devil's advocate, Rousseau is going to say, yeah, you have these artificial needs and desires, bro. Like, that's not good. Look at all this crap you need now. But maybe we could put the question like this. Let's say we had a spectrum, okay? Let's say we're trying to decide which direction we want society to go, okay? Okay, let's say we are right here in the present moment. And let's say this is the state of nature. Few institutions, few if any laws, little technology. Okay, let's make them a little bit more equal. And then let's say this is like the uber technological society, okay? There's automation, computers run everything. We can be the Wall-E humans in chairs, just watching stuff all day if we want. Which direction should we head? What do you think? Should we try to return, or should we try to move forward? With this saturation of technology and these systems and institutions in our lives. Rousseau is going to say, we should go this way. But what do you say? Yeah.
If you take out the Wally situation, definitely the technological era.
Okay, why?
It improves everything from a sporting aspect. Everything quality-wise now has vastly improved versus the next era, time-wise,
Okay.
talent-wise, technique-wise, all that stuff. The same thing can say about cars, road transportation. If you take a boat back then from this era, that could take you a month trip versus now, which takes you a few hours.
Okay. So you would rather live in that kind of world? Okay.
I feel like it's kind of complicated because like what he said makes sense and like the technical stuff would be good for like healthcare and like
Yeah.
financial stuff. Like it would be good for that, but when it comes to like the way in which people live, I feel like it's just damaging to like you were talking about like the mental health and like people just constantly looking for entertainment and like not being able to be bored. Like
Yeah. Or sit alone with their thoughts.
yeah, like that's gonna just get worse and worse. So I think it's good for some things, but when it comes to like an individual person, like people need to reflect and like take a step back.
Okay, so maybe you could hold kind of a middle view. This is kind of what I hold. I don't want to give up awesome medical technology. I love my running water. I love my electricity. But I don't want to live in a big city like this with people I don't know. I'd rather become a hippie with my friends and live in a commune or something. Now, is that realistic? No, but. So maybe they're like, okay, there are parts that we keep, but then there are parts that we take a step back from. I don't know, what do y'all think about that?
I think the joy of living in a commune can only come from the current century we live in.
Okay.
Because we already have those systems set up. I think that living in a commune, I think everyone living in communes, I think with how far our society's progressed, I don't think it would work.
Okay.
If it was like, take away all systems, everyone lives in like a communal way of living. I just don't
Sure.
think it would work. I only think the reason communes work now is because they're afforded the protections that the system offers to them, like private property.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think communists or people that live on communes will say, oh, well, we all own this. Like it's no one actually but it's still private property. It was bought by
Right.
somebody for all of them to live on, and they
Right.
all mutually own it, however you want to do it. But that is only granted to them from private property. A lot of them they might farm, but a lot of them use modern technology to do those kinds of things. And then on top of that, most of them are very anti-gun, so if anyone tried to commit crimes against that commune, I would have a feeling
They might
that
get
the first thing
steamrolled.
they might do is either get steamrolled or use the protections that are afforded to us by the systems and government we have, which is the police, in some cases. So I think that joy only comes from being afforded the protection of modern day society.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe it's not attainable without relying on the system that we have. And maybe Rousseau's view is just really romantic and idealistic. Nevertheless, I think what his philosophy does is he gets us to question in a good way some of the terms and conditions and structures that we have taken for granted. So, reflect on this yourself, individually. Is all of this working for you? Is it serving you? Are you happy? What should the nature of our laws and institutions be? Once you start digging into these questions, you'll find that they are very difficult to answer. In any case, I think it's going to provide us with a good frame and some good fundamental concepts to look at some of the other ideas that we're going to be investigating in this unit. So, I will wrap it up there. Does anybody have any questions, concerns, comments? Okay. Well, then I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.